We're really excited that you could all be here today. I'm very excited to share the next hour with you, and while we share with you a little bit about the work that we do in Timor-Leste at Mary MacKillop Today and some of the rich history that we have there. Before we get into that, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, or where I am at least, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to elders and leaders past, present and emerging, and we acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and this region. So my name is Tessa Henwood-Mitchell. I am the International Programs Group Leader here at Mary MacKillop Today, and I have the pleasure of facilitating this session with you all today. So first of all, just to get some housekeeping out of the way. So we can't actually see or hear any of you as we're in webinar format here in Zoom, but there is a chat function. So if you can ask any questions that you have in that chat function, that would be wonderful. And we will have space at the end where we can answer some questions. So today we are here to talk to you all about Timor-Leste and the work that Mary MacKillop Today does there. We have three people that will be sharing with you: myself, Jane Woolford, the CEO of Mary MacKillop Today, and Alipio Baltazar, who is the country director of our office in Timor-Leste. And we'll be sharing with you, as I've mentioned, some of the history that we have in Timor-Leste, some of the challenges that our team have been facing there of late, and then some of the work that we do there currently and some ideas for the future. So to get started, I will pass over to Jane Woolford, our CEO at Mary MacKillop Today, to share a bit about her history with the country. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks so much, Tessa, and welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as Tessa said, we're here in our respective lockdown homes in Sydney and in Dili, East Timor. And it's wonderful to be able to reach out to everyone today. We are very grateful for the gift of technology in these times because despite there being this global pandemic, it's technology that is able to support us to keep this great work going. Firstly, a very big thank you to everyone who has been supporting us. Some of you over many years, a few of you I've been able to speak with directly in recent weeks. But this session follows our recent very successful appeal around the end of the financial year time, where we focused on the work in Timor-Leste, which is beautifully implemented by all our wonderful staff and our partner organisations over there. So today I'd really like to share with you a little bit more about that program, and we'll hear from others as well. It's an appropriate time in August, late August, to be having this gathering and focusing on the Timor-Leste story. Yesterday was the 22nd anniversary of the referendum in Timor. And 22 years ago, as I'm sure many would remember, the Timorese people voted for independence. With that freedom, however, came a great deal of violence following the result of the referendum, and the big implications of having to build a country really from the ashes up. Our program at Mary MacKillop Today has its origins from long before 1999 and that referendum. My own first visit to Timor was in 1998. I was working with an organisation, and in 98 it was the days of the Indonesian Occupation, before there was any announcement of a referendum. And at that time, the territory was considered, of course, to be part of Indonesia, and the military presence was profound and, I would have to say, very frightening. I was very afraid for the people around me, the local people who lived with this presence every day. It was really clear to me that I was under surveillance for the week I was there, And it was even more clear to me that for those around me, if I was to approach them as a foreigner, I would be putting any local person's life in danger. That person would be reported, interrogated, or even worse. It wasn't a safe place. So I have a real sense of what those first Josephite sisters experienced when they went to Timor and began the work which we continue to this very day with your support. Their first visit to East Timor was in 1994 during the Indonesian Occupation. And in that time, they, like Mary MacKillop herself in her early days in regional Australia, when they visited, they were living in very basic, very simple conditions. They sought out remote communities across the territory, and they strived to provide children and young people with some level of basic education and literacy. At that time, education, as it existed there, was only for the elite. There was huge rate of illiteracy, which was made worse because of the restrictions on the local language. There were absolutely no books in the local language of Teton. And when I've spoken to the sisters, they told me that at that time there were no books in colour anywhere. And not only were Teton books banned, but Teton was not allowed to be spoken freely. So in schools, children were learning in Indonesian, but it was Teton as a language that promoted and retained the culture of the people, the cultural identity. So it was at a risk of dying out. So the sisters began their very courageous and I think very insightful work in starting to develop children's books in Teton language. And they were able to produce those books here in Australia because there were no printing facilities in Timor. And they had to publish them here or print them here and then carry them in surreptitiously back into the country as they went in and out there and distribute them into the local communities for children. Pretty soon on the back of that, they realised that the books enough were not alone and that teaching people and particularly teachers how to use such resources was also very important. So they continued this work over the years until 1999 when the referendum happened. And as I said earlier, and I'm sure many people here remember the images on their TV screens of the violence and the destruction across the country from one end to the other. Every school in East Timor was destroyed, and I actually went back in 99 and saw that with my own eyes after the referendum. The books that the sisters had produced were taken and burnt, and so things began again, but on the back of the great work that had already been established across the country. When I went back to East Timor after the 99 election, actually, an amazing thing to look back on, despite the fact I was not involved with the Josephite work directly, I found a bunch of these books that had survived. They'd been locked in the cupboard in a convent I was staying in while doing humanitarian work. And I found some of those and we were able to store them until the sisters came back. And indeed, the sisters did come back and built even more strongly on their work. The books were soon being used in across 800 schools after that. And then the work began to train teachers and in more literacy and numeracy methodology, producing more resources and so on. The sisters at the time also knew that the literacy work itself was not enough, that if children were hungry, then they couldn't learn no matter what resources were there. So they also focused on compassionate care. And so health literacy became important, and that training started to happen around schools and in communities, with the school as very often, more often than not, the central focus of a community. So here today, years later, and with your support even in very recent months, we maintain the legacy of these early sisters and maintain the legacy of Mary MacKillop herself in doing this work in Timor today. We are producing books still. You'll hear a lot more about that. We are training teachers. We are training parents to work with their children as well to reinforce positive education. And we're doing many other things besides. Well, what does that all look like in terms of impact? You'll hear a bit more about that as well. One thing for me, when I went to Timor last year, just before COVID locked us down, and just after I started in this role as CEO, I went and visited some of the remote villages up in Amera district and visited some of the schools and saw our program in action. On one of the days I visited, I saw the parents in a final workshop of theirs. And in that workshop, they were showcasing their skills. And so one at a time, each parent, and it was mums and dads, which was fabulous to see, got up and presented to the group of students sitting on the floor there some of the exercises they'd learned, some of the literacy and numeracy exercises and games. And they carried those out in the classroom so that everyone could see the skills that they had learned and could now put into practice both at home and in the community. And it was a really exciting, fun afternoon. Lots of laughter, lots of action in the classroom, lots of very proud parents who had this newfound confidence that I didn't see years and years ago in these very remote schools, with everyone learning together. So thank you for the opportunities you help us provide children and parents, families and teachers in Timor-Leste. And I'll hand back now to Tessa to lead us through some more discussion about the programs. Thanks, Tessa.
Thank you, Jane. Such a lovely opportunity to hear your history with the country and having that rich connection to the work and the ongoing story that Mary MacKillop Today has with Timor-Leste and that ongoing story that you have personally. So now I would like to ask some questions of Alipio Baltazar, our country director, who is over in Dili currently. We're hoping that his internet connection holds up. I'm excited to see that he's managed to get through, as there were some tech issues earlier. So Alipio, welcome to the event, and I'd love to hear from you about how COVID has impacted on life in Timor-Leste.
Thank you, Tessa. First of all, I would like to apologize for the networks make me a bit delay of joining the team because the internet bit of problem. All right, I'm glad to really join this meeting or workshop with a partner, and I would like to thank you for all your support that have been providing to us over a few years, and it's a really impact to our project, positive impact to our people in the country. I would like to directly respond to the questions related to the impact of COVID to Timor-Leste project that currently we are implementing. Yes, it has a really big impact. It's almost over 2 years. The COVID has really significantly impact to the project that currently we are implementing. Despite there's a challenge, but we have to find any different strategy how to really vary the activities that can continue to provide their support for our beneficiaries in each of the districts that currently we are working on, that we vary the activities, that because some of the district that have municipality that has COVID, and because we have a field-based staff can support of how to change the program according to the situations. So because currently in Timor-Leste, in Dili, capital of Dili, is really big number of COVID, and similarly with one the municipality Ermera that's currently applied of lockdown. But we have a field-based staff that can continue carry out the job, but we're still complying with the protocols of the COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Alipio. And speaking from experience, the team over there have absolutely been so resilient and made, done such an amazing job at keeping our programs going through the difficulties. And speaking of difficulties, the floods that occurred in April this year. How did that impact on the staff and on our communities?
Yeah, I think in April, the flood is really nationally impacted for the people life, and also including the beneficiary of Mary MacKillop project in the country. But we already make our effort how to support the beneficiary that we supported, and also by cooperating with the government, supporting the government. We provided last 2 months ago, we also provided last 2 months after the flooding, we also supporting the government by make a variation to the project activities that we could not be able to implement the project, but we varied the project activity by allocating to humanitarian to support people. And through the government, we provide the basic necessary needs to the IDPs, internal displaced persons, and including some of the schools also being affected by the disaster, that we also provided some rehabilitation funding through the project that we have evaluated the project, including rehabilitation schools in one of the island, Atauru, that's a part of Delhi, and also in Manufai municipality. That's three schools in Manufai. We provide support, including some of the farmers that our livelihood project in Ermera we provide, because their farms also has been eroded by the flood and also the erosions of the land. We provided support to their farms, how to get some equipment to really continue rehabilitate their farms, and including some of the beneficiary of the teachers that their house was damaged by the flood, the landslide. We also support them. So, but now the government is continuing of to reallocate people, despite that still numbers of IDPs being staying in the tent. But the government still continue to make the effort to find any permanent houses for them to reallocate them back to their original places.
Thank you, and I know that was such a challenging process that you all went through. And so how did the flood specifically affect our staff in Timor-Leste?
Yeah, we have around 9 of the staff of Mary MacKillop been affected by the flood of this year in April. And we provided some preliminary humanitarian to support them, because their house has been washed out, because those staff that live nearby the water canal or small river, they have a big flood and washed all the goods away, and we provide support. And also we continue have a second support, like to have some sort of basic rehabilitation for the house being damaged by the flood. And initial stage that we provide humanitarian, because they don't have any supplies, basic kitchen utensils and also some basic need. And we, after 1 week, we promptly provided support to help them. And we visited, we make an assessment to our staff to continue support them, so they will be able to really restore their daily life. Yeah.
That's wonderful that we've been able to support our staff through that so much. And in terms of our programs, what's the impact been on them from the floods and from COVID? And then what are some of the changes we've made to our programs as a response to that?
Yeah, for our project, that impact, despite that we have COVID and also flood, but it doesn't really inhibit all the project implemented. And we have a significant project that continue over the 2 years. We adjust the activities accordingly, basic on each of the district, because some of the district during the COVID, the governments really flexibly reopen it, so that enable all the activities implemented. And we have implemented our project that have a significant impact of the people's lives. In last year, we have one of the real experience and very strong evidence that we have made big changes for the community, that for health literacy, that some of the schools that we provided a small grant to really to provide new constructions of basic sanitations, just like in a building, that we provide to the school school building in one rural schools in Manufai districts, where they provide a very good impact for the community, because initially the schools are very rural. They don't have a basic sanitations, and very difficult for the kid how to really practice of basic hygiene, practice a healthy environment. But after we provide the schools, it's really impact. And when I got a chance to visit the schools, and they very thankful for us, because we provide basic sanitation. The kids start to practice of how to live in a healthy environment, in healthy personal, in terms of using the proper sanitations. And once we introduce it in the schools, and the community start to be aware that how important that they keep their healthy environment, because before they don't have any proper practice of using the healthy sanitation. But that's really encourage the society, and they participate how to construct the basic sanitation to support the schools in rural places. So it's really, that's one of the really example that we have, how even though the 2 years that we have been impacted of the flood and also the COVID, but we still be able to really adjust the situations with the project that we are with the funding, the activity that we are implementing now.
Thank you, Alipio. And then the final question, just quickly, what changes have you seen in Timor-Leste in the last 6 years since you've been working with Mary MacKillop Today?
I think there are a lot of things, because I'm very, before the COVID, I very frequently of traveling to the project site. I think one of the project site that I mentioned to you, that's one of the basic health. It has been 6 years, and I really observed by firsthand by myself, because in a different, I worked for another development before. Sometimes that it takes like years and to observe the impact. But the project I'm working with Mary MacKillop, and after having several times of frequently visited the project, that we really become a testimony of the strong impact of the project. One of the example I mentioned to you, that we have a support for the small grant to build a proper toilet, a proper basic sanitation for the community, how to introduce that live in a healthy environment. Apart from it, also we have the project, one of the project that I visited for the parent training project that we implemented in Manufai, in a sub-district Alas, where when after we implemented the parent training, and the parent is really teach their kid at home. When I came to the school to visit the schools, and the school coordinator, one of the preschool coordinator, ran to me and asked me that, can you extend another project to another rural place, please? And I asked why, because I have been coordinating and teach the kid over 3 or 4 years. Very difficult to get engaged with children. But after the parent that participated in the project, now the kid is very active, and they know already some basic of the alphabetics and literacy and the numeracy, and they are not shy again, or feel shy. They don't feel shy when they are singing in the front of the other students, and they are very proactive. So I was surprised, because the coordinator was speaking to me with some sort of emotion that this project is really significantly impact for the kid. I think just recently that we have an evaluation for the project, that the parent already been consulted, and they provide a very evidence feedback for the project of the parent project implemented in Manufai, or in a location that we are working at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alipio, and it's so nice to hear those stories of how important the work that we're doing is, and how strongly it impacts on the people that we work with. So it's really lovely to hear those stories. To talk a little bit more about the work that we're doing in Timor-Leste, I'm going to share with you some of the books that we've recently produced over in Timor-Leste. As Jane mentioned, these books have been created for such a long time, first by the sisters and brought over to Timor-Leste almost, in secret. And now we're so proud to be able to continue the legacy through the production of these books. So we create books every year. We are the leading provider of preschool and primary school Teton resources written in the local Teton language, which is we're filling a very important gap in the country by doing that, because there are very limited resources produced in Teton for learning. So we go through that in a really consultative way with the community, where we bring in stakeholders of local government, we bring in different organisations and children as well to consult on developing these books and choosing what message they're going to be sharing. And that's a really important process for us. So we've just recently created 2 books focused on gender, which are in their final draft form, and 2 books on disability, which I'm going to share with you all now. So the first book that I'd like to show you is one of the recent gender books that we've created. This book is called Our Favourite, and it's been produced for preschool aged children. So the story is that Tony, the main character, has a pink bag and he really loves pink. But he starts school and gets teased about having a pink bag. And so the teacher then explains to the other students that there's nothing wrong with boys liking pink, or for that matter, playing games that girls like, and that all children should respect each other. So the message for this book is about the importance of respecting each other, and that all toys and games and colours are for both boys and girls. The second book that we have that's focused on gender is called The Story of Donnie and Nina. And this book is produced for class 1 or year 1. This story is about Nina, who's the older sister and has to help at home with all of the chores. So she runs out of time to study while her younger brother Donnie plays and doesn't think he should help because he's a boy. Then he goes to visit his friend Anna, and his friend is helping with the chores at home and tells Donnie that men and women should do the housework together, and that boys should listen to the opinion of girls. So then Donnie went home and helped his sister with the chores. And by helping each other, they both then were able to continue studying and supported each other to both reach university, where Donnie became a doctor and Nina becomes a pilot. So again, the message of this story is about boys and girls having the right to do the same things at school, at home and in the community, and the opportunity for both girls and boys to have active participation in education, and that they can all achieve the same careers and professions. Then we've got the first of the 2 disability books. This one is called I Am With Friends, and it's a storybook that was created for preschool age students about Antonio, who's vision impaired. He's musically gifted and plays several instruments as well as singing, and he has friends with disabilities who are equally talented. Just like other children, Antonio and his friends dream of living happily with their families and their future successes. So the message of this book is, although different, children with disabilities have the same rights, and together everyone can create a wonderful world. And then our second disability book that we produced also earlier this year is The Story of Linda, a child with a physical disability. And so this book is also created for year 1 level. And it's about 6-year-old Linda, who needs crutches to walk, and she's not able to go to school, or she's not allowed to go to school, but she sneaks into the classroom hiding at the back, and she answers the teacher's questions correctly when all the other children remain silent. And then the teacher convinces Linda's parents to allow her to attend school, where Linda thrives. She makes friends and comes first in her class, and then she finishes her studies and becomes a famous singer. So the message of this one being that disability shouldn't be a barrier to realising one's dreams. So we're really excited to produce those books in Timor, and they've become a real necessity over there, and they're very linked to the curriculum in Timor-Leste, and we work very closely with the Ministry of Education on producing these books so that they can be used at schools. So now I'd like to share with you a little bit more about the work that we do. So I'd like to just give you a bit of a summary about all of the different programs that we've got. So starting with the Teacher Training and Teton Literacy program, which focuses on providing training in Teton literacy to teachers in both preschool and primary schools, where we really support them in developing the skills to engage students in their learning, and particularly around teaching them literacy. So that's where we use a lot of the books and resources that we produce as well. We then have the Mobile Learning Centre, which is often a bus that goes out to remote communities, and we provide fun and interactive lessons to children in schools, also providing the opportunity to mentor teachers and lend them resources and books. Then we have the health literacy program, which builds the skills of teachers and whole school communities in demonstrating and promoting positive health and hygiene practices for children, and really working on teaching them skills to work with children and teach them about health and hygiene. Then we've got the parents training program, which works, as it has been mentioned earlier, which works to empower parents and caregivers to play a really active role in their children's learning at home and get them engaged with supporting their children at home with doing their homework and getting them more involved in the education of their children. And then finally, we've got our livelihoods program. So we've got two projects within this. The first is our Vanilla Beans of Hope project, which works with vanilla farmers, both men and women, in supporting them to learn more about farming vanilla and helping them to grow their businesses, and also developing a cooperative where they can be a part of that and access capital to financially support their businesses. And then we have also the Women's Livelihood Project, which works with women and some men to also support them in achieving a livelihood for themselves through learning different skills like sewing or producing tempeh, and also accessing financial capital through a savings and loans group. So now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about where we want to go with the work that we're doing in Timor. Obviously, we've got a lot of ideas and we've got such strong programs to grow on. We're really focused on aligning with the strategic development plan of Timor-Leste, of the government of Timor-Leste, which is focused on education, health and social inclusion. So what we're focusing on at the moment is really consolidating and strengthening the existing projects that we've got, and looking at potential to expand into new locations as the need arises and as we reach the goals that we are reaching for in terms of the places that we're currently working in. We are very focused on reaching the remote and rural places, as Mary MacKillop and her legacy has always encouraged. We're also working on really improving the quality of our projects and the capacity building of our staff in Timor-Leste, who are all local staff, and also strengthening our monitoring and evaluation of our projects. We're also developing a strategy to respond to disasters that occur in Timor-Leste, such as natural disasters like the floods or the current pandemic, and developing really strong strategies of how to work on preventing the risk that occurs when these disasters occur. And then we're really looking at how we can continue to use evaluations of our projects to learn from what the participants of our projects are telling us, and improve the projects after listening to their experiences and seeing what's working and what's not, and really growing and improving the way that we're addressing the different issues that we're seeing in the communities and how else we can respond to those. So it's a really exciting time for us in Timor-Leste, and I think there's still so much that we're planning to do that we're really excited to bring you all along on the journey with. So in that sense, I would like to then ask Alipio what your hopes are for the future of Timor-Leste.
Thank you, Tess. For what we hope, I think we are expecting and we hope that we can expand more our project to rural places, because so far that's we are working in a rural places, but we still do a small part of the rural places, because after the independence of Timor-Leste, most of the Timorese people moved back to their original places, because during the occupation of Indonesia, most of the community has been forced to live nearby the main road of the urban place, so that make it easy for the military to control population. So what we hope that in the future we will be able to really expand more our project by setting more our office in a regional basis that will enable us to really expand intensively expand our support for the rural places, because it's around 75 to 80% of the population of Timor-Leste, they are living in the rural places. And as you may know that Timor-Leste government also have a very limited resources in order to get reach to the community in rural places, because those schools that we are supporting, and some of them, they take initiative, their own initiative, community initiative, to build the school by using of the local material. The government could not be able to provide some support because it's entirely very rural, and sometimes also the rural places that's very difficult to be accessed by the government. And we have several of these schools that sometimes we provide support, and we have to stop our car a bit distance and we have to walk. So we are expecting that with the support you provide and continue support our project in the future, that enable us to really continue access our support to the rural places and marginalized people, because that doesn't mean that the government have intention, but because the limited of resources, and so the road condition is really inhibit them to really access. And we are the one that, I think, just give one case that this year, the first time that we started visiting one of the school, that we brought up the government officer from the Ministry of Education, visit the schools, and the director and the community was so happy, and they welcome us like it's really like heavy welcome us. And because they was saying that the only Mary MacKillop, the first time that brought the government officer to visit their school since they got independence, because the school has been voluntarily built out by the local community, and we brought out, we provide support. They were so happy, because this is the expectation, the hope that we are going to have for the future, to continue support for our support. I think in Timor-Leste, that's for the partner of education, they're working with the government now. Mary MacKillop is the one top of the organization working mostly in a very rural places. This experience has been reflected from the district that I come from, Bikeke, back 2 years ago, when we have a team that our team went there for training the teachers, and the Ministry of Education trusted the books for us to transport, because they have a transport, but they could not be able to travel to that place, because the place was so dangerous and very isolated. And because they don't have any pathway, or they don't have any road, but the car will find a way how to reach the community. So it's a bit of different way approach. So that we have been experienced such way, so that we expected that the more supported that we got for the future, that's what we expecting, and we can try to really build up or extend our office in the regional basis, that will make the location nearby us, so that we can provide our service to those underserviced community. Thank you.
Thank you, Alipio. And yeah, I think that's such an important aspect of the work we do, is that we're often the only organisation that's reaching certain communities. So we've got to continue doing that and continue serving the communities that really need us. So Jane, now I'd like to ask you, what does the future look like for Mary MacKillop today in a world that is so impacted by pandemics and natural disasters?
Well, I'd like to be able to answer that question really precisely, but I think that's quite impossible. So much is what we don't know, even in this near future, about how long the pandemic itself will go on, but we do know that obviously the impacts are there and increasing for people. And like all disasters and tragedies, the impact of such a reality is always mostly felt by those who are most vulnerable, living to a greater degree of poverty. We know that's the case. So what it means for us at Mary MacKillop today is that we need to maintain the work we are doing, and we to date have been successful doing that. As you've heard, the word of 2020-21 is probably pivot and adapt. We've certainly been doing that. But to be able to maintain the programs had their origins decades ago with the Sisters' early work in East Timor. And then, as Alipio said, to work with the communities themselves and with our partner organisations and with our staff on the ground in determining where it is appropriate for us to expand that work. I guess, you know, in the best case scenario, if this pandemic was to finish tomorrow in its entirety, we know that there will be children who've missed out on vital areas of education and educational experiences in this year and a half. So we need to be working at making that up, and we need to be working at developing these programs to really catch up on literacy, be tackling illiteracy, and you know, that's with a focus just on Timor alone. We also have to think about the other 3 overseas countries we work in and the impact indeed that this pandemic's having within Australia and our Australian program communities. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we need to keep going.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Jane. So I realise we're running a little bit out of time today, but maybe just opening up the opportunity for anyone to ask a question if they would like to at this stage. Otherwise, we can go straight to a video that we have prepared for you.
I think there's a hand up there.
Do you have a question? The best option is to write it in the chat so we can see your question and we can respond to it.
And I think Caroline has a comment there.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you for joining us. What is the language most commonly spoken in the countryside? Alipio, would you like to answer that question?
Well, we have about 32 dialects currently in Timor, but the national language, we have 2, that's Tetum and Portuguese, and we have 2 working language, English and Indonesian. But in our municipality that we are working now, that's for municipality, they have a different dialect, but Tetum is a widely speaking language across all those municipality. Like in Likisa, they call it the Tokodede, and in Manufai, they have Mambai, they have Tetunteri, they have Kemak, but that's the dialect, but Tetum is widely speaking around this municipality. That's in Manufai. And in Ermera, they have Mumbai, they have Kemak, and they have Bunak. But Dili is really mixed a lot. Yes. But Tetum is really a language that widely speaking across the country. Yeah.
Thank you, Alipio. And our team in Dili also communicate with us here in Australia in English. So they're very multi-talented and multilingual. We have another question from Michelle asking how good is the IT in rural settings? Again, Alipio, you might have the answer to this one.
Yes, so far we have 3 telecommunication providers in the country. In the rural places, I think it's about 85 to 90% people are access to internet, but the network is sometimes a bit of trouble. But like we have this one, I try to got into that connection, sometimes get trouble. But they in a rural, they can't access to the internet or IT telecommunication, and they also have access to the televisions, national televisions, and they also use a satellite that's television satellite that can reach to some of the mostly the news coming from Indonesia and some sort of another country like ABC. They have access to some, but still limited because the network is very big, because they need to really establish more their what they call the network, their infrastructure, basic infrastructure of telecommunication in the rural, so that it can strengthen their network.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alipio. And yes, I mean, we sometimes struggle with the connection when we're having meetings from Australia into Dili, but generally speaking, we're very lucky that technology allows us to connect how we do. We have one other question from Caroline about how many women are involved in the livelihoods program. So again, Alipio, would you like to take this one? I'm really happy for you to share.
Yeah. I think the livelihood project for the one we call women group, it's a mostly women. I think Mary MacKillop in Timor-Leste, even the staff in the office in Dili here is mostly woman, female instead of male. But now we try to balance the both gender, male and female. But previously when I came on board, that's mostly female. But now that we still also, even I came on board, but the recruitment mostly we have good qualifications of female that got the job. And most of the coordinators, the currently project coordinators in Dili here, that they only have one project mobile learning center is a man. The rest of project coordinators are female.
Very much like our office here in Sydney, we've got entirely women.
And in that livelihoods group, Alipio, can you just remind us how many women are in that group? I think, you know, I was surprised with that group growing vanilla, which is such a new commodity to really grow successfully because it's a many years investment. But I was surprised to discover that most of the farmers involved are women in that group. And it is quite a large number, isn't it?
It is, yeah. The livelihood, there are two components on the livelihood. One is the women group. Initially during the Christian Brother Christian Brother time was about 58. Oh no, 56. And there were a number of them that resigned, and also a few passed away. And now we just left the original from those Christian Brother women from Christian Brother. They left only 45 now, but now we have a new the transformation, the women group into cooperative. Now that they already tend to 65 now. We have a new members. And for the for the vanilla project, initially started the project was mostly dominated by men. That's about 47. But now we have the number that already increased really dramatically, about 665 members of the vanilla farmers, and they have a mix with the women. I think maybe around females around 50 or 60, but I'm not quite sure the figure. But the number already reached up to 665 farmers.
Wow.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alipio, and thank you, Jane. And thank you everyone here who joined us today. That's all we've got time for, unfortunately. But it's been such a pleasure to share this time with you all and to share about the work that we do in Timor-Leste and the importance of the support that you've provided us. And, you know, we hope to continue walking this path with you all, and that you'll continue in the family of Mary MacKillop Today with us into the future. So we'll leave you with a video. Jane, is there something you wanted to add before?
No, I was hoping we did have time for the video too.
Yeah, so we'll be sharing a video to wrap up this session. And yeah, thank you again for all your support and for joining us today. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for all the notes.
Tiada barat, Mary MacKillop Today.
Thank you very much, Mary MacKillop Today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mary MacKillop Today.
Obrigado, Barat. Obrigado, Barat.
Thank you very much to all sponsors.
Thank you very much, Mary MacKillop Today.
Obrigado para o sponsor Siranoto.
Thank you so much to our sponsor.
Thank you, Mary MacKillop Today, and for all sponsors. Thank